Stalin's methods to maintain his power. Beginning in 1933, Stalin dealt with political opposition through the purge of opposing party members. However, for the purges to start, Stalin wanted to give the process a degree of legitimacy. So, in 1934, Sergei Kirov, the leader of the Russian Revolution and a high-ranking member of the Politburo, was murdered. He was shot at Leningrad office by Communist Party member Leonid Nikolaev. What part Stalin played in this remains an issue that historians are not yet fully agreed upon. Nonetheless, Stalin used the murder as a pretext for eliminating his other opponents in the Communist Party, the government, the armed forces, and the intelligentsia. The purges sparked the show trials, which began in the late 1930s. Show trials are a public trial in which the judicial authorities have predetermined guilt of the defendant. So, the purpose is to serve as an example and warning to others should there be dissidents or transgressors in the public. Important officials were arrested, tortured, and forced to make confessions during these trials. Stalin also used show trials to eliminate the old Bolshevik Party because Stalin believed the party was a threat to him and his power. After a show trial, the guilty were often executed or jailed. Another way Stalin eliminated opposition would be labor camps. The years 1936 to 1938 became known as the Great Terror. It was during this time when over 3 million people were executed or sent to labor camps. Overall, the purges and show trials were successful in eliminating alternative leaders and terrorizing masses into obedience. Stalin was therefore able to act as a complete dictator until the end of his rule. Stalin's second method to maintain power was dealing with nationalism. Russia had 15 republics at the time. Stalin used a two-pronged approach to deal with all of them. Number one, national cultures and languages were allowed to flourish and republics had some independence. This is different from the Tsars who tried to Russianize republics. Number two, Moscow had the final say, and if necessary, force would be used. For example, there was the purge of the Ukrainian Communist Party after they said collectivization had failed in 1930. Stalin's third method to maintain power was propaganda and indoctrination. Why? Because using propaganda was the easiest way to control the public and their opinion, to support and expand Soviet power, to portray Russia as a superior nation, and to increase war efforts. The communist mission is to eliminate backwardness or to have a modern socialist society. So during 1928 to 1931, the Cultural Revolution occurred. During this time period, artists, musicians, writers were to produce works of social realism to glorify the Soviet system. Social realism is a type of art that realistically depicts subjects of social concern. The goal was to be engineers of the human soul by helping indoctrinate masses with socialist values. Thus, restrictions were set on paintings in that they could only portray political figures and exemplary workers in factories and in the fields. Literature was also censored, and authors could only write their books on themes considered permissible by Stalin. Authors who disobeyed were executed, imprisoned, and exiled, which was a way to ensure everyone will follow the rules. Films were also a major medium of propaganda. Stalin agreed with Lenin's perspective that films were the art of the 20th century and that they should be used as a propaganda medium. So Stalin built hundreds of theaters across Russia, and all films glorified Stalin's policies, such as collectivization and the 5-year plans. And Stalin made sure that movies showed just how happy the Russian people were with their regime and leader. Furthermore, no film could be released into Russian theaters unless it was reviewed and approved by Stalin. This gave Stalin enormous control over what messages his people received. Overall, much of the propaganda established his personal dictatorship by elevating him to a divine level. It showed his close relationship with Lenin and that only he could interpret and carry out Lenin's ideas, military genius, religious devotion, his respect for the Russian people, his strong work ethics, leadership, and education. Speaking of education, Stalin greatly valued education, considering he had very little of it. Illiteracy was reduced from 50% in 1927 to 19% before World War II. Stalin also changed the education system to train young people for slots in the economic, social, political, and cultural life of the state. He also implemented uniforms because he wanted the children to feel unified, equal, and part of a group instead of individuals. He hoped children will like the feeling of unity and belonging and will decide to join the army when older. Did his brilliant theory work? Maybe. Do you feel inspired to join the army? I certainly don't. Stalin also used youth groups because Stalin saw children as excellent means of propaganda. In these groups, children were instructed on Stalin's political ideal. However, to ensure the children loved Stalin, the groups were enjoyable and had fun activities such as sports, cultural, and social activities. His goal was to recruit children as his supporters at a very young age so they would religiously follow his ideology as adults. He hoped that this way his ideology and leadership would pass down